Hello and welcome to a really quick tutorial video for the StateMachine system. In this tutorial I want to show you how to set up a state machine with my custom state machine behaviors and what we have to add to our code base in order to make it accessible for the state machine system. So my aim is to control this particle effect over here, and I want it to be controlled in my state machine I have here, and for this we are going to extend the existing system. So let's get starting by creating first off a script for handling the particle effect. So we create a new C# script and call it effect manager, and this effect manager will be placed on our effect object we have here in the scene. So we drag and drop it onto our game object over here. Okay, great. First off, we have to put some references in our effect manager script, and the first one of course will be a public reference for the particle effect. So I'm creating a region for my public members, and inside this region I say public particle system, and we call it effect. Okay, and for controlling the effect we want to turn it on and off to match this new GUI I have added over here. It says toggle effect. This is the first thing we want to work on, and we want to turn it on and off again via our state machine. So we need a function for this. We call this one in region private methods the private void toggle effect function. It takes a bool as input parameter called enabled, and basically everything this will do is it checks the bool. It says if enabled, we will start the particle effect. This is achieved by saying effect.play, and if we put false into the input, the else statement, we say effect.stop. Okay, this is it. So basically everything that will happen when calling it is turning this effect on and off again. So let's save and go back to Unity. And now don't forget to set the reference by dragging and dropping the particle system onto this model behavior. So by now we were able to activate and deactivate the particle system, and because we want to do this over our state machine here, we are extending the existing system by creating a new substate machine, because this one will be a little bit more complex behavior, and we call the substate first of effect, and inside effect first we will only create one state. This state will be called effect is playing. So while we are on this state, the effect shall be turned to play, and if we are not on this state, the effect shall stop playing. We need a transition from our start state, the menu state, so we say make transition to states effect is playing, and of course we need a transition back to the menu state. Now this one is important info. On the transitions we always have to uncheck these boxes. We do not want any transition durations or delays, because this could cause weird behaviors or some bugs when the effects are triggered after some time, and this could break your logic. So by now we were almost able to transition from the menu state to the effect displaying state because we have our transitions set up. All we need now is a condition we can apply to these transitions, and for this reason, because we have a toggle button, we will create a trigger and call this one effect trigger. Don't forget to apply the trigger to the conditions. Effect trigger for going in and out. So what we have to do next is creating a function we reference to the toggle effect button, so we can go from menu state to the effect state. We will create this function inside our effect manager, so we can put it on the toggle effect button, and this function has to set the effect trigger. There is already a built-in class for this behavior inside the logic StateMachine controller component, and so we can say in the effect manager in a new public method, so we create another region, public methods and region, and here we say public void toggle button, and this function will set the trigger. And setting the controller StateMachine can happen by a static reference, so we only need to call the logic StateMachine controller. It's this one in manaspark assets.logic StateMachine. So we double click and have added the right namespace, and here we say dot set animator trigger, and here we have to put the name of the trigger. It was the effect trigger, and the second input would be a delay if we want to give it some time to set the trigger, but we do not want it, so we put in a 0. Save it and go back to Unity. So by now we are able to go to the toggle button and drag and drop, after we have added another function, to the onClick event, and drag and drop our effect with the effect manager on it, and say when I click it I want to call the toggle button. So if we click it, the transition will be enabled and we are going to the effect displaying state. Let's try this. We say toggle effect and we are on the effect displaying state, and if we hit it again we are back in the menu state. Great. So now we are coming to the phase where we can set up our actual StateMachine behavior. And for this we are doing the following. We are going to the effect displaying state, and first off we say add behavior, and because we want to add a state to our controller StateMachine, it's the overall StateMachine for our high level game logic. It's also controlled by this game object here. You can see it by looking on this little orange icon. It's the sender icon, and for this we add a controller state actions behavior. This StateMachine behavior holds a list of actions, and first off we would need to add a class reference in which we then can choose from a list of methods. At the moment we have only these 3 classes. This is our always available built-in class, the logic StateMachine controller, and these other 2 classes are from the demo scenario. In order to add a new class, the new class would be the effect manager. We also have to apply a little change to our script. This is not a big deal. We only have to add an interface, and this one is called action controller. It's also in the namespace manaspark assets.logic StateMachine. So by now the StateMachine system will be able to see this class and take reference to it. But at the moment this class would be a class without any accessible functions, so we now have to add a function we can also reference to the StateMachine system. And in order to achieve this we have to follow this pattern, and we say under public methods we add another region. You do not need the regions, but I like to structure my code this way. So we say region StateMachine commands and region, and inside this we have to put a public static void. This is important because the StateMachine system will only look for public static void functions to be referenced, and we call this one also toggle effect, but with a capital T, and we give it the same input parameter like our private method. We call it enabled. And in here we have to use the singleton pattern because we are inside a static function. So we will quickly create the singleton. Let's make it public. We say public static. This one is important. Now to the class itself, effect manager, we call it instance. And don't forget to set the instance. Usually we do it in the awake function. Oops. So awake, and here we say instance equals this. Great. So now in the toggle effect method we say instance dot toggle effect, and we are passing our input parameter. Great. Save it and go back to Unity. Now we should be able to see our effect manager by clicking the plus button, and here it is. Here's the effect manager, and in the effect manager we can now do the following. First off, we have to choose in which state phase our method shall be called. First off, we want to create the toggle method for turning the effect on, so this one will be on enter. So when we are entering the effect is playing state, we have to say enter, and the function we want to call is our toggle effect method we have just created. You can see there's only just one function, just because we have created only one accessible function in here. So we say toggle effect, and here now the StateMachine system sees that there are some input parameters. The first one is called enabled, and because we want to turn the effect on, we have to pass a boolean with the value set to true. And now we want to add another function for the case that we are leaving the state. So we say again on the plus button, effect manager, now state phase is exit, and the function we want to call is again the toggle effect, and we leave the input parameter set to false. Great, but before we hit play, just make sure we have connected the function to our toggle effect button. So we go to our GUI, to the toggle button, and yeah, we have set it already. Sorry, I have forgotten it. So by now we should be able to test everything. So we hit play, and here we are, and currently in the beginning we are in the menu state, and here are also some StateMachine behaviors I have added. And the first action, it says when exiting we shall toggle the menu canvas. This will fade out everything. You will see this effect when we are transitioning to the effect state, because then we are leaving the menu state. So let's click the toggle effect button, and great. Here we can see the effect is playing. It's nice and bubbly in the scene. And if we hit it again, it stops playing because we have left the effect state. Once again, I have clicked, and now I'm in the effect is playing state. I click again, and I left the state. Great. This is the first goal we wanted to achieve. Now you may have noticed the second part of our GUI, a little checkbox and a label that says red material, and I made this one to implement some kind of conditional logic. So when we check this little box here, the effect you have seen shall not be with this blue material, but with the red material. So in order to achieve this, we will go back to our code, and first we are creating 3 public references. 2 of these will be a material reference. One is the blue material, and the other one is the red material. And we need a reference to a checkbox, so we say public. I think this one is called toggle. Yeah, it's toggle in Unity engine.ui, and we call this one checkbox. Great, save it, go back to Unity, and before we forget it, we want to set all the references. So the blue material is this one, the red material is this one, and our checkbox is down here. It's a red material toggle, game object, drag and drop, perfect. So now go back, and what we will do now is creating two functions that will change the material of the particle system. We can do it either in a private method and call it from the outside via a StateMachine command, but in order to save some lines of code, we will do it directly as a StateMachine command. So we say again public static void. The first one will be set blue material, no input parameters needed, and the second one will be public static void set red material. And the changing of the material is achieved by saying, of course, instance, then the reference to the effect, and I think here we have to say get component to the particle system renderer. Particle system renderer, if I remember right, yeah, this one shall be a particle system renderer, and here we say material, and this one is of course from instance the blue material. Yes, we can copy this whole command, paste it and change it to red. Perfect. So let's save this now and go back to Unity, and now we are extending our existing logic. Now we need a state before we toggle the effect or before we can enter the effect, and we need a state which evaluates the checkbox. So we create another state and we call this one evaluate checkbox, and of course we add controller state actions StateMachine behavior. And what we will do now is we add the function from effect manager on enter, of course, and say set the red material. But we will not always set it. We will only set it if a condition is true. And in order to add a condition, we need public static functions inside our code, but instead of return type void, we need return type boolean, because you can see here is no available function. So we go back into the editor and add another function, and we call it public static. Now this one is important, return type bool, and we call it evaluate material. Evaluate checkbox, of course. And the only purpose of this method is to return the checked state of this checkbox here. So we say return from instance the checkbox dot, I think it's is on, yeah, this is the state of the checkbox. So save it, go back to Unity. Now we can add to the check method the evaluate checkbox method. And now this works the following way. On enter we say set red material, but only if from the effect manager the method evaluate checkbox returns the value we are setting here. By now set red material would be called if evaluate checkbox returns false, but the checkbox says red material, so the return type of evaluate checkbox needs to be set to true. And if it returns false, we want to set it to blue, of course. So we can add an else statement, and this one will be again from effect manager. The function is set blue material. So again we enter, we look if the condition is met. If yes, then we say set red material. If not, we say set blue material. We are still missing the transitions, so we are going to add them. First off, like before, oh no, I see there's already one. I think we can delete this one. We add a new one now to the evaluate checkbox. Always remember to uncheck these boxes and values, set them to 0. We go back in, and now this transition is enabled by a trigger. As soon as we reach the state, the trigger will be unset again. But we do not want to stay on this state, we want to immediately go further to the next state. In order to achieve this, first off we make another transition, of course. Always uncheck these values. And we want to reuse the trigger we have in here. It's the effect trigger. So on this state we can also add a function to let the state machine control itself. So we add now from logic state machine controller, you remember the built-in helper class, and on enter we want the function to call. On this one is the same as we have added to the toggle effect button. It's the set animator trigger function. This function has two input parameters, and the first one is the parameter name. So we add effect trigger. This is the trigger name, and of course we don't want any delay. And I can show you what will happen if we say, let's say 3 seconds, because by now we should be able to test everything. Let's hit play, and we are on the menu state. We hit toggle effect. We are now on the evaluate checkbox, and boom, 3 seconds later, because of our delay we have set, we are now in the effect displaying state. So, but we do not want the delay, so we want it to happen immediately. We want to immediately see the effect playing. And yeah, let's check if our checkbox is working. So we apply again. Now we say, okay, let's use the red material. We do the toggle effect, and yeah, super great. There is our red material, everything works fine. So we have used our very own code base. You have seen I've written a brand new script. I have just done some minor changes. I have applied the action controller interface, and in order for our state machine system to see the functions we have created, they need to be public static void. This is more of a management reason, because I thought we do not want to see any method we have created in our class, so these ones need to be special methods. On the entity state machine systems it works a little bit different. They can be just public and not static, because it needs reference to the game object itself, and there we can't use static references. But this one is a controller state machine where we have only one reference for a manager which is controlling over overall game state. There is also one more technique I want to show you, and this is the continuous condition updating technique. I have just made up this name, but in order to change the material every time we check this box while the effect is playing, we can also add the condition to our effect is playing state. So while the effect is playing and I say red material, I want it to change to red, and if I uncheck it, I want it to change back to blue. How we can achieve this? Well, basically we just copy everything we have done here, but instead of state phase enter, we will do it in the update method. So let's try it. We add again our effect manager, and we say on update, I always want to set my material to red, only if my checkbox says okay, I'm checked. Otherwise I want it to set it to blue. Of course this behavior is not optimized. because every update the material will be changed. This is not very performant, but we can extend our own code to first check if the material is already blue. If it is blue, we will do nothing, but if it is not blue, we will change it to blue. So this one would be in your responsibility to choose how complex the logic is in the code behind the state machine, but via this update conditional function we can create quite dynamic behaviors on our state. So let's go and test it. I do the toggle effect, and if I change now the state of the checkbox, boom, it turns red. I uncheck blue, check red, uncheck blue. This is because of the update function. By now this was the last technique I want to show you in this tutorial. These were some of the basic techniques, and I hope I could help you a little bit with setting up a state machine system. And I hope you remember the most important things, like always unsetting the transition values and what you have to do in your code in order to make it accessible for the state machine system. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I also hope you enjoy using my tool and that it can help you in your workflow. So thank you. Goodbye.